All right, welcome back to another episode of the Miko Love Podcast. I have a very special guest. Today we have Paige Pritchard. And if you follow on Instagram, then you know we're here to talk about impulsive and emotional spending. Paige, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I know this is a very big topic. I mean, we could talk for 5 hours or more about just getting into the basics of this, but we're going to try to cover, I feel like, the most helpful points for listeners. I know all of us struggle with this in some capacity in our lives or at some time in our lives. So would you agree with me on this, that I have this opinion that emotional spending will always be part of our lives because we're always going to feel something. However, I think that there are ways to combat and control that emotional spending, not necessarily just stop it. Because I feel like saying, oh, just stop, with emotional spending. Don't feel anything. Like, I always hate hearing like that. Don't bring your feelings into financial conversations with your partner. It's like, wait, what? It's like,
what?
I can't just stop feeling. Like, it's not realistic. So I kind of feel the same way goes with impulsive shopping and emotional spending. Do you agree with me on that?
I 100% agree with you. And I'm even going to take it a step farther and tell you that my personal opinion or view on the matter is that 100% of the spending that you do, we could classify as emotional spending.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Because what I teach and what I believe is that your feelings or emotions are fuel that drive everything, every choice that you make, every choice that you don't make, and ultimately why you want the things that you want. If you look around and you look at anything in your life that you've previously bought or purchased, on the surface, you think, oh, I'm just buying this thing. Oh, I'm just buying a product. But really, what you're buying all the time is feelings and emotions. The only reason you want to buy the things that you want to buy is because you think that when you have it and when you buy it, you will get to feel a certain way. So when you look at it that way, my argument is, and I'm totally with you, I'm like 100% of the spending that you do is emotional spending. The question is, how do we actually spend in an emotional way that's in a healthy way versus a destructive way? So I'm in agreement with you on that. Totally.
Okay, perfect. And so we're in agreement that it's all emotional spending, but I also feel like there are certain, whether environmental or emotional triggers, right, that cause us to kind of go off the deep end sometimes. So it's more and far beyond just, say, our regular normal emotional spending. I know for me, like when I'm bored or when I'm feeling really hurt by somebody, that's my emotional trigger. Boredom and feeling hurt for me, and I've learned that it might sound really simple to come to that conclusion, but it took me many years to recognize that about myself and why I do that. What are some common emotional triggers that lead to overspending in our lives?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with the one that I see most commonly in my world, which is boredom. And I always tell the women in my world, in my community, is if boredom is a trigger for you, what you have to do is you have to befriend the emotion of boredom. And a lot of this is just first of all, understanding that and having the awareness that as a society, we have been trained and conditioned to villainize negative emotions. And we've been sold this lie by consumer culture that the goal of life is to feel happy all of the time. And that's actually not the goal. What I always say is the goal is to be human, not happy all the time. And a pure, true human experience is going to be probably half good and half bad. It's not going to be perfect all the time. You're going to have seasons that are more bad than good and vice versa. But when you get this into your head and this idea of, oh my gosh, whenever I'm feeling a negative emotion like boredom or like insecurity or loneliness or whatever it is, I can get into the more common ones, our red flags go up and go, oh, this is a problem because I'm not supposed to be feeling this way. That thought, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or this shouldn't be so hard, or this shouldn't be so difficult, or I don't want to feel this way. Those are some of the most toxic thoughts that you can have about your emotions, because when you're thinking those thoughts about your emotions, you will try to escape your emotions through shopping. So we have boredom is probably the most common one. So you have to just realize like it's okay to be bored.
Yes.
Like, it's cool to be bored. I can
Yes.
tell you some of like the biggest and most like revolutionary ideas that I've had that have come to me about my life or my business or whatever happen when I'm bored. Like the magic truly comes through when you're bored because your mind has like 2 seconds just to quiet down and not be overstimulated by something. And as little kids, we're told, like when you went to your parents and you're like, Mom, I'm bored. Dad, I'm bored. Like, what did they say? Like, go find something to do. Go entertain yourselves, whatever. So then we come into adulthood and we think that it's not okay to be bored. So we're constantly stimulating ourselves all the time, whether it's with our phones or shopping or food or binging Netflix or whatever it is. So boredom is big. The other one that you hit on, we can kind of classify it. Let's just classify it as sad. You're feeling hurt. You're feeling just kind of an emotion in that camp where you're really just kind of looking for that pick me up. And another one that I see quite often, which is a pretty sneaky one, is whenever things in your life, whenever there's external circumstances in your life that feel out of control to you. Maybe you've just lost a job. Maybe someone you love has just passed away. Maybe there's just something uncertain happening in your life. Maybe it's a relationship change or whatever it is. We try to grasp for that control and regain a sense of that control through shopping.
Yes.
And control is an emotion. Like a lot of people think control is like this outside thing, but control is an emotion, like feeling. That's why we always say like, I want to feel in control. So control is another one I would say. So you have boredom, you have loss of control. You just kind of have bigger, just like I'm feeling sad, anxious, stressed, overwhelmed with life. I'd say that those are that probably encompasses, I'd say 75%.
And have you ever heard of like environmental triggers? Because I know like for a fact so first for me comes the emotional trigger. I'm bored. Right. Yeah. And then what do? Driving over to the mall to do some window shopping. Yeah. We all know there's no window shopping at the mall. Okay. Yeah. There just isn't. Right. So here I come out and mix this all in with, I just lost my mom in April of 23. And so what I found, the craziest thing that I found in that whole grieving process, and I'm still on it, is my feeling to need to buy for things that remind me of her or to bring me closer to her. Does that make sense? Like, for instance, me and my husband were walking through the mall. We walked by the Hallmark store, which was one of my mom's favorite stores. She loved that store. And immediately I gravitated toward that store, just because it reminded me so much of being in there with my mom and just like my mom, right? Yeah. And I would have bought something. I know I would have. However, it was the craziest things. I just lost all feeling in my legs and I just collapsed like in the store, like in front of, and I am just like bawling. I couldn't even go in the store. But my point is there's emotion or environmental triggers, like seeing the Hallmark store, going to the mall when I'm bored. Those are my, two biggest ones. The mall is probably one of my biggest ones. What are some type of environmental triggers that people see? And have you heard about that from people that maybe you have as clients?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I always say like triggers to spend are all around you every single day, like literally all around you. You could probably, if you even just started paying attention to it, you could go through your day and probably pinpoint 100 of them.
Oh, I mean, especially if you just open up your phone or watch TV, like the marketing is everywhere.
Everywhere in your inbox, on TV, on your phones, the people that you hang around with. I mean, you have people in your life? Like people can be triggers to you. Do you have people in your life that you hang out with where it's like, we shop, like she is my friend where we shop? Or I hear this a lot where it's like my mom or like my parent or my mom or my sister or whoever. It's like when I'm with this person, we shop. Like that's what we do. People can be triggers. And the exercise that I always walk, this is like one of the first things that I always have people do when they come into my world, is we go through this exercise where I have people really sit and think about what are your main triggers. We can have external triggers, things in our external world, and we can also have internal triggers. Internal triggers are going to be You can have mental triggers and emotional triggers, because sometimes you will notice, like maybe you might notice the emotion first. That might be the first thing that you notice.
Right.
And then you realize, oh, okay, every single time, to your point, that I see something that reminds me of my mom, that triggers that emotion. So like you notice the emotion first, but then you start to put the pieces together of going, oh, okay, yeah, because it's something that I'm like seeing or doing in my external world. So I always have people look at all of those. Mental triggers are examples of a mental trigger are what I kind of call like permission giving thoughts. Those thoughts that your brain is like always offering you about like, oh my God, I need that. Oh my God, that's so cute. Oh my God, I have to have that. Or even just stuff like I've had a really hard day. I need to take the edge off. Like those are just those things are just running through your mind, and you think that they're like true and factual. And I'm like, they're just thoughts. They're just like electrical impulses like firing in your brain. Like they literally mean nothing. But then we take them and we make them, like we assign all these meanings to them. So I'm like, triggers are everywhere. But the key is to clearly identify what your triggers are, both external and internal. And you cannot, I want to make this so clear. I always say this all the time. There's no possible way that that you'll ever be able to eliminate 100% of your spending triggers. Unless you go live in the woods, like, I'm sorry, no, it's not happening. There are some that you can, like there are some steps that you can take, right? Like you can clean up your email inbox. You can unfollow people on social media. You can limit your interactions with certain people that you feel like just the relationship's not serving you anymore. But that's the first step. It's like evaluate triggers, eliminate the ones that you can, and then continue to do the work so that in the future, as you continue to get exposed to triggers, they don't really become triggers to you anymore. Like a trigger that's a trigger to you right now doesn't have to be a trigger to you later on, like once you actually start going through and doing the work.
Yeah. I always say, for me, like this is how I kind of think about it in my life. And I've never really said this out loud, but it's what I do in my life. So first thing is acknowledge. The 3 A's. I call it the 3 A's. Okay. First thing is acknowledge. Acknowledge what I'm feeling and where I'm at. 2 things. And then other thing is to avoid. Now, I always say avoid because I know if I can acknowledge and see and understand what I'm feeling and where I'm at, then I can avoid and get myself out of that situation wherever I might be. Maybe I'm heading the mall. Oh, we're turning around. We're going to do something more productive at home. Or if maybe I'm having certain thoughts, maybe I just am like, for me, I'm just learning to sit in that uncomfortable. I'm learning to sit in those thoughts and those feelings. And then number 3, for me, the third A is adjust. So once I am acknowledging and I'm avoiding, and then I'm going to adjust. I'm going to adjust what I was planning to do versus what I'm truly going to do. And one of the best examples I can give in that life that I really truly feel changed my life is running. That was my adjust. So every time I felt the need to spend, or I was saying to myself, I need that. And for me, it was always materialistic things, right? It wasn't like I need that experience. It was stupid, small things that I felt were like, I was going to die if I didn't have it, like that new Patagonia coat or something dumb, you know? And so what I did is I started shifting. And anytime I felt that, I don't care if it was a light jog, a run, a walk around the park in the sunshine, bringing in other happy stimulators for me. And now running is turned into this huge thing in my life where it's completely transformed me in the most positive ways. So what do you think about my 3 A's?
I love it. And I love it. And as you're saying this, stamp of approval, A++. I love it. And I'll walk you through kind of my version of it. It's similar, but I think it just goes to show like why this works so well and why this is so effective, right? So what I always tell everyone to do, this is the biggest thing. I'm like, if you're going to take one thing from me or my work, right? If you're an emotional shopper, I always tell people, you do not have a spending problem. You do not have a shopping problem. What you have is a feeling problem. The shopping is a symptom of you not being a skilled feeler. So what I always tell people is I'm like, you don't need to feel better. You need to feel better. Like you need to learn the skill of feeling better.
Right.
And there's a big difference between those two things. So here's what I always tell people to do. When that urge, I call it the urge to splurge, right? When that urge hits you,
yes,
and you're like, want to go to the mall, want to go to Target, want to go here, want to get online, whatever it is. I'm like, you have to first remind yourself that there's no need, nothing has gone wrong. There is no need for me to escape my emotions right now. Like, I am a human being having a pure, normal, natural human experience. This is the 50-50 that doesn't feel so good. This is the part of the 50-50 that doesn't feel so good. So I always say step one is to practice and get intimate and get to know the feeling that is coming up for you right now, whether it's grief, whether it's anxiety, stress, boredom, loneliness, like you name it. It could be a litany of things. But again, you have to be able to show yourself and prove to yourself that you can sit with your emotions. There's no need to run away, because so many of us adults, like, we think that we're feeling our anxiety or our stress or grief or whatever it is, but we're really not. Like, we feel it and then we go and we buffer and we distract ourselves. So I say sit with the emotion for 10 minutes. Like, literally set a timer on your phone, get somewhere quiet. I know this isn't always possible, but just do the best that you can here. But just be with the emotion. Name it. Like a popular saying is name it to tame it. Like, literally say out loud, I'm feeling so anxious right now, or I'm feeling kind of bored right now, or I'm just feeling really, really sad right now about my mom, right? So you be with that emotion and you practice feeling. Step two is, I call this creation before consumption. And I think it's really critical when you're trying to break this pattern of trying to solve for your emotions with shopping, of being proactive and prepared and coming up with a list of like 3 to 5 things that are going to create a net positive effect in your life. So for you, a big thing for you is running. I'll say for me, a big thing for me is walking. I'm not a runner, but I love to walk. I could go and walk 10 miles, like, no problem. I love to walk, right? So, but it doesn't even have to be a physical activity. It can be journaling. It can be meditating. It can be doing something creative. Like, it can be calling a friend, right? Calling a friend and catching up with a friend, creating that love and connection. It could be learning. It could be learning about a new skill or a new hobby that you're kind of trying to get into. Just anything that's going to create a net positive impact in your life.
Yes.
And so I always say that by the time you do those two things, step one and step two, where you've felt the emotion and you've told yourself, I can handle this emotion, nothing has gone wrong. Then you've done a creation activity, which, by the way, most, if not all, creation activities give you the dopamine that you're actually seeking through the emotional shopping anyways.
Yes.
And what I always say is, after you've done those two things, the deal that I always make with my brain is, okay, brain, after we've sat with the emotion and we've done a creation activity, if you still want to go to Target or to the mall or to whatever it is, we'll entertain it at that time, but we're going to go do these two things first. Like, that's the deal. 95% of the time, by the time I get through those two things, I've given myself like the peace, the security, and the dopamine that my brain was even after in the first place. And I feel good. And I'm like, yeah, I don't even need to do the shopping anymore. Like, the urge is gone. The urge dissipates. So it's kind of like that, right? Like, the awareness, like, you're having awareness around the emotion, you're adjusting. What was the third one? Awareness, adjust.
Oh, it was awareness, avoid, adjust.
Awareness, avoid, adjust. Yeah, exactly. So it's basically like pretty much the same thing in the same flavor, but it's really just like giving yourself that time. I think time is the biggest thing. The first place that I always have people start is, I call it my 3Ds. You have your 3As, okay? I'm going to give you my 3Ds.
We're talking about bras. Yeah, you sound like we're talking about bras over here.
Acronyms, analogies, like, we love it, but it's good because it helps you remember, right?
Yes.
I call it my 3Ds, right? You need to put as much distance as you can. Distance is the first D, between your desire and the decision to buy. The bigger that distance is, more distance between the desire and your decision to buy, the better chance you stand of not making impulse purchases, not overspending and spending money you don't have, not shopping from an emotional place. Time brings a clear head. So even just giving yourself, even just saying like, I'm going to take a beat, even if in the beginning you're like 5 minutes, even if that's all you can stand at this point, 5 minutes, and just work yourself up from there. But you've got to give yourself distance, because I'm going to tell you what, and it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. The world that we live in has curated an environment for you that completely has eliminated that distance. Like one click buys, you don't have to get your credit card number. You don't have to do anything. It's just so easy and so quick. And they've done that on
one day shipping.
Yeah. It's all done on purpose because it makes them more money, because they understand, like, they're very smart and they understand human psychology on a deep level. And they understand that the quicker that they can get you to make a decision, the more you will buy and the more that you will spend. So when you don't have that distance, things are happening very, very fast, very quickly. And that's how you get yourself into a point where you're like, how did I get myself into $5,000 of credit card debt? How did I overdraft my account again? How did I blow through my savings? It's like, because you're just reactive. You're just going through life reacting. You got to give yourself a pause.
Okay. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I feel like, and I can't think of the term right now, I'm having a brain fart, but it's when we are wanting things so quickly, so fast, right? We live in this age where it's like instant gratification. Yes. I don't know why I was having a brain fart, but yes, that's it. It's like, all of a sudden, 2-day shipping ain't good enough for us anymore. It's like, we want it the same day, or at the very least, the next day at 8 a.m. on our doorstep. Like, it's freaking, I mean, and so I have this theory, okay, with all of this, and you're so true. Everything around us is playing into this, right? To get us into a reactionary mode instead of an intentional mode. I 100%, a lot of us are out there reactionary spending rather than being intentional spenders. But here's the thing. I also think that apps like TikTok and Snapchat, even now Instagram with Reels, we are literally trying to teach ourselves important topics and information in 15-second, 30-second snap bits. And it's driving me insane, because no one has the attention span to sit down and actually get the critical information they need to truly understand the subject matter that they're curious about. It drives me nuts. And it's like, I will always be, even if it's not popular, I will always be a long form video content creator. I don't care. I'm not going to try to fit. Especially, I'm gonna jump off topic a little bit. What drives me, the thing that drives me the craziest about the TikTok viral videos is on the topic of investing. I cannot tell you how much predatory information and wrong information is out there about investing. And it's all being shown in these really entertainment form 15, 30-second videos. And I want to go and just rip them all down and be like, don't listen to this. But anyways, I think what I'm talking about is this instant gratification to know something, to buy something, to get something right now. When in reality, we are not meant to consume that way.
No,
we're just not.
No, there was a really interesting stat that came out. It was about a year ago. It was October of 2023. Consumer spending reached an all-time historical high. And when we're talking about an historical high, meaning like it's literally the highest it's ever been in history. My theory, I haven't found that this is like backed by anything, but just doing what I do on a daily basis, this is my theory about it, is just think about, I think you and I are close to the same age.
Yes.
Just think about like how different your shopping is today, even versus 10 years ago, which again, from a historical context, 10 years is like a blink of an eye. It's nothing. When we're talking about all of time and all of history. When you and I were like, growing up, if you wanted to shop, you had to like get in the car, drive up to, first of all, get your mom to drive you up to the car, you know what I mean? And then you'd go to the mall, and it was like a whole thing. It was like a whole ordeal. And now my theory is that the reason that consumer spending is at an all-time high is because our consumption has sped up so fast. We are shopping so much more. We are buying so much more. We are spending so much more because our consumption loop, like the consumption loop of like buying something, going through that loop has sped up because things are getting delivered to us quicker, which means the allure of everything is wearing off. We're going through that cycle so much faster. And that's what I'm always saying, is that your spending and your consumption, if you let it run uninterrupted and with no conscious awareness of what's happening, which is how a lot of people are consuming and just spending nowadays, is it's like a hamster wheel that you will never get off. Yeah. And that's another thing related to this topic of emotional spending, is you have to be, I think it's advantageous to everyone to really understand like what marketing really is. Like, marketing is not trying to sell you a thing. It's not trying to sell you a product. I call it purchasing promises. That's what you're doing. You are purchasing a promise with everything you buy. It's kind of like what I was saying at the beginning. But that promise that you're buying, usually what the promise is, it's usually either one of three things. It's usually either an emotion. So a product will tell you, I'll give you a couple examples. Let's just say like makeup. Let's just say like an under eye concealer. You think, oh, I'm just buying this under eye concealer. No, what you're really buying is you're buying confidence. You're buying desirability. You're buying beauty. Sometimes it's not that deep, right? And this is what always people say, well, what about if I'm buying toilet paper? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sometimes we just want to be able to wipe our butts and have our butts be clean. But like with the more like discretionary stuff, okay, with like makeup or skincare, or this is very true in the beauty industry, but even something different, right? Let's just take even like a book, right? Like when you buy a book, like you're not just buying the book, you're buying the emotion of wanting to be a knowledgeable person, of having that control, of having the knowledge. Yes. So you're either buying an emotion or you're buying belonging. That's another really big one. Okay. You are buying something because you want to feel like you belong. That is one of our deepest core needs as human beings, is the need of belonging and wanting to be a part of the group and feeling like we belong and feeling like we're not going to get left behind and ostracized. And our brains have really not changed that much from the caveman times. And in the caveman times, getting ostracized from the tribe or left out of the tribe, kicked out of the tribe, meant death, right? Yeah. Our brains still very much function in that way. But now it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm getting kicked out of the cave. Now it's like, oh my God, I don't have the tumbler that everyone else has. And what does that say about me as somebody who doesn't have the tumbler, who doesn't have this designer bag, or who doesn't use this skincare brand that's like going viral that everyone seems to have? This isn't like conscious stuff that's happening. That's why it's so important that you bring awareness to it and you figure it out. And then the third promise that's constantly being sold to you by consumer culture is the ability to impact the way that the world sees you, right? Like I call this like buying attention, buying eyeballs, buying validation. You essentially buy things because you want people to see you in a certain light. You want people to perceive you in a certain way. And so much of the emotional spending that we're doing, it's not even about us. It's not even for us. It's like literally for other people. It's like, oh, well, I want this guy at my work to notice me, or I want my husband to think about me in a certain way, or I want when I go to dinner with my girlfriends, I want all of them to be like, oh, she's the cutest one at dinner, or whatever it is. Like we just have these weird things. And so you just have to realize, like, it's not about the dress or the concealer or the book or the tumbler or whatever it is. It's always, that's why I'm saying all spending that we do is emotional. Right. So then you have to really start to realize, like, okay, I see it now. I see what I'm being sold. And we can kind of get into some remedies. But one big thing that I'm always telling people is I'm like, never give your money a job, or never give your stuff a job. That really is your job. That really is your responsibility. Right. Taking ownership over your own feelings and emotions. Like, it's not my concealer's job to give me confidence. Yes. Like, it's not the dress's job to make me feel beautiful. Like, that's my job ultimately. And a lot of
this is so true.
A lot of people don't want that responsibility because they just want to abdicate responsibility to the stuff or to their consumption. But the problem with that is that it doesn't work. That's the hamster wheel I was referring to earlier. That's the hamster wheel you get yourself on and you go, oh, okay, well, it wasn't the concealer. I bought the concealer. I'm still feeling like crap about myself. Still don't really like myself. I'm still feeling insecure, whatever. So maybe it's not this concealer. It's got to be that concealer. It's got to be this. It's got to be this. And that's the spinning hamster wheel you get yourself on. And you will never get yourself off if you continue giving stuff and your money jobs that really aren't their jobs to begin with.
Oh, so true. I mean, self-awareness is so important, but not only that, I think like learning more about yourself, you know, I had to admit out loud that I did not like the way I looked.
Yeah.
That was one of my biggest spending problems is I went out, like you said, I assigned the job to stuff, getting my nails done, going to the tanning salon, getting my hair done. I thought all these things were supposed to fix me, and they fixed me on the outside, but they did nothing for me on the inside. Right. And it took me a very long time to say that out loud, that I do not like the way I look when I see myself in the mirror. Like no one wants to say that out loud. No one wants to admit that. And it took many years for me to be able to get over that and truly love myself for who I am and the way God made me. And I had to get there, and it took a long, long time. But it's one of those things where I always tell people, whether it's emotional spending, finance, money, budget, debt, investing, whatever you're working on, the core of it all is self-discovery. You will not get far with the information. You will not get far with all this stuff that's you're learning unless you know the core and the base and the foundation of what exactly is happening. And that starts with self-discovery and self-awareness. So with all this being said, I know a lot of us, okay, even I still to this day, I enjoy some retail therapy from now and again, right?
Yeah.
Can you say that can retail therapy ever be healthy? Or are we saying that it should always be avoided?
I think retail therapy, well, let's just call it this. Let's just call it spending money. Let's just call it shopping, spending money. I've never really liked the term retail therapy because I think it just plays into kind of what we were talking about, where it just gives shopping the job. It's basically saying I'm going to use shopping to make myself feel better. Like it's shopping's job to do that. And a lot of people, when they come into my world, they think that like the goal of my work is to have you stop spending completely, right? They're like, oh, you're going to be the person that's going to tell me that like I can't spend money on anything and spending money is bad. And, you know, when you spend like whatever. That's not my message at all. I believe that spending is abundant. I believe that it's what money is here for us to do. And I think it's how we actually deploy money in our lives to use it as a tool to make our lives better and more valuable and more beautiful. But I think there's a couple ways where you can spend, where you're doing it in a productive way and in a way that's actually going to make your life better versus spending money in a destructive way. And I think that's the key differentiator for people. And like, I'm like, that's what I help you do. I help you spend money in a way that's actually like going to help you and make your life better versus all the spending that a lot of people are doing right now that are that's not doing that for you. So here's a couple of things that I think are really key and really important, right? And I know obviously you're huge on this, so I know I'm going to get the Miko stamp of approval. But it's making a plan for your spending ahead of time, right? Like deciding on where your money is going to go and what purpose that's going to serve for you ahead of time. And I know for you, like for me, I'll tell you a couple of things in mine. I have a coffee line item in mine, in my spending system. I call it like a spending system, but I have a line item for coffee. I have a line item to get my nails done. I have a line item for clothing. So this is not to say like, oh, I'm never going to be able to buy like beauty items or any of these things ever again. It's the nature in which you're doing it. It's the emotional state that you're doing it in. You can spend money on skincare and getting your nails done or books or going to Starbucks or whatever it is. But because you've decided that's what you want your money to do for you ahead of time, versus being like, I'm using this to make myself feel better. I'm using this to numb emotions that I really should be feeling instead of trying to shop away. So
Yes.
when you have a holistic plan, like how Miko teaches you how to create, when you have your budget and your plan, that's you deciding ahead of time where you want your money to go. And so you could even work in to your budget, like a line item for Target or a line item for your favorite store. Like, let's just say there's a boutique that you really like going to. Like, you can work in money so that you're still going and spending money, but you've made that choice ahead of time, and you know that it's a puzzle piece in the greater plan of what's going on. And by doing that, it's not going to completely derail everything else. One thing I will say too is tapping in to the emotional state that you're in when you are doing that more discretionary shopping. I think that's really, really big, because they've done studies to show that when you start shopping in an emotional state where you're feeling bad, it's just like eating sugar or drinking alcohol. It's just like anything else where you're like, I'm going to use this substance or consumption to make myself feel better. You will always have that like spike of dopamine, right? And that's the confusion with people, is they tell me like, but shopping feels so good. I'm like, I know, trust me. I know, I've been there. Like, I hear you. It does. But that, like when we say like, oh, it feels so good, that's like the cheap kind of dopamine. That's like the fleeting rush. Like, it feels good in the moment, kind of like how eating a donut in the moment feels good. But you're always going to have that crash, just like how you have a hangover or a sugar crash. You'll have a spending crash, right? Like, I hear from a lot of people all the time where they're like, it felt amazing in the moment, and then I got home and I had this like borderline panic attack because I'm like, holy crap, what did I do? Yeah. So that's what you have to recognize, is like, it shows that when you shop when you're feeling bad, you will get that rush. But don't confuse that rush for a long-term solution to you feeling bad, because what's waiting for you after that rush is over is the crash. And what the studies show is that when you crash, you will actually crash farther down than you even were before you started shopping. Yes. So it just goes to show you that retail therapy, emotional shopping is not a long-term solution to making you feel better. And the more that you do that to yourself, the more you're going to fry your dopamine receptors, the more they're going to get down-regulated, which means that in order for you to continue getting those rushes, that high of the buy, the stakes have to get higher. You have to be shopping more. You have to be spending more. You have to be buying more expensive things. It works the same way as drinking. Like, you know, it's like, oh, used to be one glass of wine and now it's a whole bottle of wine. It's the same thing with our spending. So that's why you've got to really tune into, am I feeling bad right now? Or just asking yourself the question, how am I feeling? How am I feeling today? Like, is today a good day? Is today a bad day? How am I feeling today? Is there emotion that my brain is trying to tell me I need to solve with the shopping? And if you're kind of in a place, if you're having a day where you're really stressed or you're really sad or something is going on, that's just not the day. It's not the day to shop. Yeah. Like, it's not the day. So really just like tuning into that. So it's not to say like, don't ever shop, don't ever spend. It's just being really conscious about, why am I wanting to do this? Am I wanting to do this to soothe, to numb, to buffer, to distract myself? And you have to remind yourself in that moment, all this is going to do is dig me deeper, truly. Yeah. Yeah. Like,
I agree. I agree with this. And it comes back to like what I think the biggest thing about all this is the reason I'm so passionate about budgeting, Kate, the reason I teach and preach and dedicated my life to this is because it did something very important to me. It changed me. One, it helped me figure out my values and what truly mattered to me. Okay, that's one of the things you have to figure out, is once you get really clear on your values and what is important in your life, you're able to differentiate between your spending on all the fluff and the crap that really matters. But number two, my budget taught me how to be an intentional spender. If we set up a plan beforehand, before we go shopping, we're no longer allowing ourselves to react in our spending. Instead, we're saying in a very intentional way, I value this. It matters to me. It's so important to me. It deserves a place on my spending plan, on my budget. And then what happens when we're talking about getting this rush, this dopamine, when we go out and we spend and then we crash? Here's what I figured out and why my budget's so important. I was able to replace that dopamine high and that crash with something that made me feel even better. When I spend money, okay, I have a line item in mind, for fun spending. That's my thing. When I go out and I'm window shopping and I spend $30 on a t-shirt that wasn't planned, right? And I get out my fun envelope and I spend my fun money. That feels so much better.
Yes.
Spending the money that I intentionally set aside, right, for my favorite store or my coffee or whatever it may be in your budget, it gives me so much more of a dopamine high than going out, buying it, coming home and saying, oh crap, I now have to pay off my credit card, or how am I going to pay this off, or what the hell did I just do? Instead, it's like this really great feeling like, you know what? I bought that. It wasn't in my budget. That's okay. But I had it somewhere, like spending plan in my fun envelope, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's why I'm so passionate about budgeting, because it allowed me to go from a reactionary spender to learning my values, what truly matters and is important to me, and for me to be an intentional spender. And I know you talked about getting distance, this distance between deciding we need to buy and then having the action of us actually doing it.
Yeah.
So that distance for me, I've always called it learning how to be a patient spender. It's okay if you want an $800 Patagonia coat. I mean, having wants is not bad. It's how you get the want that matters, right? And so I would want that $800 Patagonia coat and I would put it on my credit card and I would say, I'll just pay it off in payments later. Today, what my budget has done for me is it allowed me to save $100 from each paycheck, and I set it aside. I may not get the coat right now, but I know I'll get it later and I won't have any debt, and I did it in a very intentional way. That feels so much better versus the first option. And that's why I'm really,
Yeah, 100% agreement with you. And this is why I think that as a society, we have completely lost the plot of how good delayed gratification actually feels. Delayed gratification, a lot of people don't even realize how good it feels because they just don't do it. Like, again, they're just reacting, everything's so impulsive. And that's why, I talk a lot in my world about this new, about all these new, buy now, pay later services, right? Like the Afterpays and the Klarnas. It's just another layer of, I think credit cards was kind of like the first layer of it. And now it's just getting even more
convenient,
just sneaky, convenient and sneaky, where it's like, to your point, you don't have $80 for these shoes. Don't worry about it. Do you have $20? Because you can get the shoes today for $20. But what I don't think a lot of people realize with that is, again, we're like, I want it now. The desire has struck me. That means I must have it now. And I always say, a desire for something doesn't automatically create the need for you to have it now. You can have the desire for something and sit with that desire until you actually have the money to buy it. But to your point, when you're slapping stuff on a credit card that you don't have the money to pay off, when you're using these buy now, pay later services, you have to think of what's actually happening there. You're like, okay, I'm getting the thing. And you also have to recognize the most excited you will ever be about anything is that moment, right before that you decide to buy it, right? Where you're like, or the moment that you either get it in the store or you click that buy now button. That is the best and the most excited that you will ever feel about anything. And from that second on, it starts to mentally depreciate to you. Think about all the stuff. Go through your house right now. This would be a fun exercise. Go through your house today and look at all the stuff in your house and remind yourself of how excited you once were to get that thing that's now in your overflow room or in your attic or your basement or stuff.
Girl, that is so true.
I remember how excited I was for this. And now it's I couldn't even care less about this thing. So when you're slapping something on a credit card or you're using the buy now, pay later service, you are essentially robbing yourself of that anticipatory period, because you're buying it, you're getting the thing, and then weeks or months down the road, when the allure and the novelty of it and excitement has completely gone away, you're still making payments on that thing. And that feels awful. Like literally that feels so terrible. Versus what you teach is like, there's no problem if you want the $800 coat, but let's save up for it, because you're going to get, it's going to feel twice as good because you're going to be able to savor that anticipatory period. You're not going to have to be stressed about how you're going to pay for it once you get it, because it's paid for. Yeah. And I often find this with me. I have what I call a things I want to buy list, where when I see something I want to buy, I'll like take a screenshot of it and I'll add it on there. Again, time brings cooler heads. I can't even I would say that more than half of the stuff that goes onto my list, once I've given myself enough time on it, I change my mind.
Yes.
I don't even want this thing anymore.
Yes.
I know I was really excited about this a couple weeks ago, but now it's just like, it's just like, there's so much value in the delayed gratification. It's 100 times better than instant gratification. But again, I think as a society, we've totally lost the plot on the value of it and how good it actually feels. But I always tell people, I'm like, you got to just give yourself a chance. I'm like, even if you just do it with one thing, try it with one thing and just see how it feels compared to buying it impulsively. It feels so much better.
So, okay, last question. And then I want to get into where people can find you and all the things that you're doing. How do you feel and think that social media, specifically social media, has played into our spending habits?
You and I could literally talk all day about this.
I know.
Okay. I'm just going to give you my quick theory. Again, this is all my theory. And like you, I spend a lot of time on social media because it's a necessary evil for me.
I know it.
Grow my business and stuff. So, but I do spend a lot of time on it. I always say, I call it the breadth and the depth. Okay. So if you look at our consumption, like, let's just go back to like the 40s or the 50s, like our consumption was so much less. Like our homes were smaller. Like just the amount of food that we would have in our homes was just all of it. The clothes, the articles of clothing we had, it was all less. As our exposure to other people in the outside world has continued to increase, our consumption has increased. So it's like you start seeing more people on TV, you start seeing people on like movies and media and whatever, and you can see this like slow uptick of time over time. Well, then you introduce social media into the mix, which was basically like a bomb to this, to this formula, because what you have just done with social media is you have taken the breadth, meaning the amount of people that you now have exposure to them that you never did before. Because in the past, it was like celebrities and famous people and athletes and your neighbors and like the people in your close circle. And like, that was pretty much it. And now it's literally like anyone on social media, basically.
Yes.
For the most part, you have access into their world. So that breadth of the amount of people that you are now exposed to and have access into their lives has exploded. That breadth has gone from like here to here. And then you have the depth, meaning the amount of visibility that you actually have into someone's life. Again, in the past, it was very curated, like with the celebrities and stuff. It was very surface level and curated, and it was only what people wanted you to see. Now you literally see inside people's pantries. You see their skincare routines. You see what cleaning products they use. You see what bath towels they have. You see how they dress their kids. You see their ice cube collections. I mean, it's insane.
Oh my gosh.
So you have the breadth and the depth, and it has just like, so what once was like this has now ballooned to like, it's not even on the screen anymore. Yeah. And so what that has done to our consumption habits, it's basically, like I said, it's just been like a bomb going off. It's pouring gasoline on an open flame. And I cannot tell you how many people come to me in secret because nobody wants to openly admit this, but they're like, social media has destroyed my finances, truly. And they're not kidding. True. They're like, it really has. Like TikTok has destroyed my bank account. Instagram has destroyed my bank account. I'm in debt. I have no savings. I just keep, every time I go on, I'm buying. So all that to say, it's like, it's a whole thing. And you and I could have a completely different episode about like just social media. But all that to say, like, it's a big deal. It's had a big impact, and it's only going to get worse.
Oh, 100%. I agree.
Like,
I 100% agree.
like, do you think it's going to get better? I'm like, nope.
Nope. Like, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but just nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. Okay. So before we end, where can people find you? What are some amazing things you have going on? I know you have amazing coaching and you have, a membership and all these things. Tell us where people can find that and what's going on.
Yeah. So probably the best place to start is social media. So my handles on Instagram and TikTok are at overcoming_overspending. I also have a podcast that Miko has been on. We were talking about that before we hopped on. It's been a couple years.
It's amazing. It's amazing. But, it's one of the leading money. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But my podcast is called the Miko Love Podcast. And what I'll do, I'll send it to you guys. You guys can link when you came on my podcast.
Yes.
In the show notes, if you want to start with that episode from a couple of years ago. And then, if this is work, if you really resonated with this conversation and you're like, I'm definitely an emotional shopper, then come into my world. I have a membership where you get my entire process. We meet 2 to 3 times a week live to do coaching. So you actually get to come into the community and I give you coaching. You can come and you can tell me what you're struggling with and you get my process and coaching with me. And you also just get to be in a community of other people who are working to fix this. And I'll just say this, like this is an area that comes with a lot of shame, a lot of hiding, a lot of embarrassment, and putting yourself in a community where you're like, okay, I don't have to hide here. Like I can be totally open. I can be honest about my situation, bring everything out into the open to actually make meaningful change. Come join us. So you can go to overcomingoverspending.com to learn more about that.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Paige, for being on the Miko Love Podcast.
Thank you for having me.